All right, so what we did in the last couple tutorials is we created a foot roll, we set up a root for our hips, we skinned the jacket, but it's not that great yet, but we'll get there. We also created a spline curve, so I'm going to right click and go to control vertice here, and let's turn these off, and so you can see the spline curve, and I'll turn off the thing here, and that's what this is here. So what we want to do now is we want to create some controllers so that we can control the way the body moves and how that spine works. And so what we can do too is I'm going to turn off show and then, excuse me, my joints here so we can see this a little bit better. And on our spline curve here, I'm going to go back to that control vertex and I'm going to select, let's see, these top two here. Actually, let's see. We have one here, we have three. So what I might do is 3 clusters. So one, if we look at the character's torso, we could have something like that. And then the one here, so we can move that center part, like the rib cage, and then one for the belly. So one down here. And that'll give us a little bit of hip movement there. But we've already locked in the hips in place, so it looks pretty awesome. All right, so I'm actually going to undo all of those. And let's start with this top one. And I'm going to go to constraint. And what we need to do is we need to create a cluster. And then we're going to parent that cluster or attach that cluster to another object. So I'm going to select that cluster there. And back on our NURBS curves here, I'm going to right click control vertex. Do the same thing here. I wonder if it'll remember to add that cluster. And it did. And let's do this one more time. And these clusters, notice I'm not in control vertex. And I can hit W. And it gives me a transform to play with, like these clusters when I select those. And that is, see, like if we, here, let's, notice if I grab this cluster, I can now grab that. I'm going to hit W, click off, and then select that cluster. Let's see, here's cluster 1, cluster 2. All right, so you can see it's in there. And we definitely have to fix that skinning. So please don't give up on me yet in respect to the skinning part. We're going to get to it. I just want to get through a lot of the meat and potato stuff. So let's go to control vertex here. And then we have this guy down here and we want to add a cluster there. So deformer and then cluster. So let's also name this. So I'm going to name this stomach cluster. I should do an underscore there. And I'm just going to copy the cluster part. And then this would be, oops, it looks like I've got the curve selected. And I only want these clusters. So there's stomach cluster. This is, I'm going to do this rib cage cluster. And then this one here is going to be our neck cluster. All right, now let's create, I'm going to hold spacebar, go to create, and then NURBS primitive, and then I'm going to create a circle here. I'm going to hit R and scale that down a bunch, and then just hit W, and I'm going to hold V and snap it to that cluster. Let's hit F to focus on that. And I just want to make sure that it's outside of there, but it's not that intrusive where it'll affect, you know, kind of like my fun animation stuff with this cool character. So I'm going to hold shift again, and I'm going to hold shift one more time, and I'm just going to snap these by holding V to point constraint this to each one of these clusters. Then I'm going to select each one, and I have a freeze transform here. The way I added that to my own custom thing is I went to modify, I held control and shift, and I clicked on freeze transform, and that will add it. And if you want to remove it, you can just right click and hit delete. If you're not sure how I created my own shelf, I went here and I went to new shelf, and actually let's go to shelf tabs, bring that back, new shelf, and I typed in a name and I hit OK. But if you decide to create your own shelf, which I think is a good idea, make sure to click this little options box and go to save all shelves so that it saves it on there for the next time you're on there. All right, so there's a couple ways you can do this. I'm going to name this, let's see, lower back underscore CTRL, and then this is going to be our middle back underscore CTRL, and then this is our upper back CTRL. Now if you click on this cluster, you see it says net cluster. If I hold shift and I select that and I hit P to parent, it'll parent it underneath it. Another way of doing this is if I grab my net cluster and I middle mouse drag it, you could see it makes it a child of it. So now when I move this, you can see it moves that cluster. So that's another way of doing it, or kind of like making it a child or parenting it, and you don't have the extra transform data. So here's my stomach cluster, which I'm going to attach to my middle back, and then rib cage cluster. I'm going to, that should actually go under the stomach. Let's see, rib cage is here, stomach cluster is down here, and that should be, did I do this wrong? Let's see, upper back, neck, which is good. Stomach cluster, middle back. Okay, stomach cluster, lower back. Let's see, sorry, middle back. All right, there we go. And let's make this here. Okay, now when I select these, and let's bring this on, I can move independently, but there's a problem. When I move this one, the top should essentially follow it. So let me show you an example. So if I select both of these and I hit P to parent, now when I rotate this, I do want some movement going this way, right? So if I move this around, I can kind of move that, but I don't want I don't want it to move to the sense where it doesn't feel as natural. So that's why I'm parenting these down. So like if I leave them too independently, it gets weird. So I'm going to select this one, then hold shift and select the next one in the chain and hit P to parent. And now if I'm rotating, that way I can do it more like an accordion type thing, where I can rotate them like this, you know, or move them like this.